Oh, thank you so much, MCs. Thank you for bringing us today. We're going to have such a great time. We have amazing guests. So please, Eve, let me know, how are you feeling today?
I'm feeling quite well. I'm feeling great and excited for this conversation with Tori and Lati joining us today. How are you guys doing as our guests?
I'm doing really, really well. Thank you so much. The sun is actually shining in England, so I feel very grateful for that because we don't get the sun that often.
And here in Bali, Indonesia, it is, I think now nighttime, so I've got my cup of tea with me and wrapped up a really, really great day. But honestly, I'm so excited for this conversation. Thank you for having us.
Amazing, Melati and Tori. We have been waiting for this moment. So please let me introduce you the first question. What has your journey been like becoming an activist and founder of your organizations, YOUTHTOPIA and Back Activist Collective? When did you start and what prompted you to begin this journey?
Tori, do you want to kickstart or shall I?
Go for it. Yeah.
Honestly, the journey has been insane. I started when I was 12 years old, and when I started, I had no idea of the word changemaker or activist. It was simply this moment, this feeling that I saw a problem and wanted to take action. And then it's been a roller coaster. I always say there's never a dull moment because there's always something happening. A lot of lessons learned, and I'm excited to dig deeper into all of that throughout the conversation. But Tori, what about you? How's your journey been like?
Yeah, I mean, I'm from Hong Kong. I now live in the UK, but a lot of my environmental activism started in Hong Kong. It's a very densely populated city with a huge plethora of different environmental issues, and everything from conservation to land reclamation. And all of these issues really prompted me to want to go down this route of activism. But it wasn't actually until, in the last few years that when we founded our organization, Bad Activist Collective, we wanted to draw lots of connections between the climate crisis and other social justice issues, because these connections exist. And I think part of why we started the Bad Activist Collective was to firstly draw on all of these different perspectives, but secondly, dismantle the guise of perfectionism in activism. We call ourselves bad activists by virtue of the fact that we're imperfect and we're human. And we really want to normalize conversations for people to feel like they don't have to be perfect to start creating change in their communities. And for us, that was so important because I think a lot of people get really afraid of, making that first step to committing to any particular cause because they don't think they're good enough. So yeah, we wanted to create a space that was really all about dismantling that idea of perfectionism.
Thank you so much for both those answers. I learned quite a lot, and just learning that it's a journey and it's not an overnight thing that happens and you just have an organization. So as a founder myself, I've experienced a lot of challenges, and I'd like to know, what was a challenge that you did not expect to encounter creating your organizations, and how did you solve the challenge that you encountered? And based on this experience, what is a piece of advice that you give or share with the young people watching this right now, interested in starting their own organizations?
Oh, I can take this one. I mean, Eve, you were mentioning such a relevant reflection after Tori and I both shared just now, the fact that, you don't have an organization overnight. And I think for me, having started at such a young age, at 12 years old, honestly, I thought we were going to achieve the change, the vision of making Bali, the island that we grew up in, plastic bag free, at least, during the summertime before school started again. We thought easy peasy, it won't take forever to get Bali to ban plastic bags. And little did we know, something that we had to learn the hard way was that change doesn't happen overnight either. And that persistence, that commitment, the feeling of never giving up is something that we had to learn. And also, how did we overcome that? Surrounding yourself with a team. And honestly, sometimes I feel like, where do you start to build a team? remember that you can depend on the closest friends around you, other students from your school, reach out to your teachers, try and find like-minded people within your community. You don't have to go big or find a full-time team all at once. It's about starting with the people in your circle, getting them to feel passionate and aligned with the same vision, and then working from there to grow. So that's really how we overcame that, bigger picture, longer term activation within Bye Bye Plastic Bags.
That's really inspiring, Melati. And I think a lot of people can learn from that idea that, change doesn't happen overnight. And I can definitely testify to that, because something that Bad Activists has really tried to do is figure out what our main goal is. With something as broad as like, we don't have to be perfect in activism. That's great, but what is it that you actually want to do? And I think a lot of the time when people start organizations, you want to change the whole world. And that's something that is really admirable, but sometimes that can be really overwhelming. And so for us, a huge part of what we wanted to focus on, and this is something that has really evolved in the last year, is this idea of regenerative and wellness spaces for young people and activists, because a lot of us are burnt out. A lot of us are constantly working to try and create the future that we want. And for us, we wanted to create a humanizing space which is dedicated to not only dismantling perfectionism, as I've mentioned, but also creating tools and spaces that benefit people. And, I'll get into it in a bit, but for us, that was the biggest challenge. And so my piece of advice for folks would be, sometimes it is okay to start off small. There are big issues that we want to tackle, but at the end of the day, we also have to be realistic. It doesn't take just one person to do all of the work. It takes a community. And so, really work together with other people and achieving those goals bit by bit. So yeah, start small, but think big.
I totally love your answers, girls. I love the fact that you love the sense of community. You are always looking for a team, and you are realistic as an activist. That's really important, and that's something we need to be willing to learn. So let's start with the next question. As a climate activist, what have you learned about the connection between climate change and gender inequality? Please, in this case, Tori, start, and then we go with Melati.
Yeah, for sure. So, I think for a lot of people in the climate space, we now really understand that social justice is a huge part of what we call climate justice. And in doing so, we recognize as well that women and girls and people of most marginalized genders are going to be disproportionately impacted by the climate crisis. But also in understanding that, we can recognize that women and girls are part of the solution to climate change, not only through empowering women and giving them autonomy to their education and their bodies, but also in understanding that there is an element of care that is associated with femininity and essentially, well-being that we really need to harness. And for me, it's not surprising that the majority of people that I come across in the environmental space are women and girls. I think most of the people that I work with in my team we obviously have some amazing men who are allies as well. But I think that is a testament to the reality that, we have always been on the front lines of change. And when you are marginalized to any degree, you are willing to take a stand for what is right. And the other thing that I want to mention very briefly is that I'm writing a book at the moment, and a lot of it is about community care. And for a long time, care has been commodified and dehumanized in a way that is associated with femininity in a patriarchal world. And in order to create community structures that are long-term and also very nourishing and healing for people, we have to start embracing these things that have been so stigmatized. So for me, it's a huge part of the stuff that I'm working on at the moment. And yeah, I think that women and girls are the solution.
I mean, with that, Tori, you nailed it. So I'll just, add briefly that I couldn't have agreed or said it better, and really remember the power that we have as girls. I didn't even realize it. That's thanks largely to the childhood that I had growing up. My parents never, made being a girl a barrier to creating change or for standing up for it. And in that sense, super privileged and very lucky to have had that upbringing and that support. But at the same time, as Tori mentioned, if you look left and right, almost all of the activations are very much led by young girls and young women, because I think there's also an element where when we look at a challenge, we see instantly the opportunities. When we see something that's linear and doesn't work anymore, we think immediately, how can we create that into being circular? So I think that there's a lot of excitement in the movement, and especially because of that vision that we have, which is a lot more bigger picture, a lot more long-term. So yeah, I think very exciting time to be alive and to be a girl.
Absolutely agree. What a time to be alive, indeed. And so seeing that you've given us such insightful information on how we can create this beautiful link between climate change and gender inequality, as activists, do you think that activism can be a career? We've seen how activism calls for so much time, effort, commitment in order to see the real change. So how do you envision the role of young people in activism as a result of this? Maybe... Yes, you can go first.
I'd love to dive right into that one, because, I'm sure, Melati, you also get asked this a lot, but constantly I am asked, how do I earn a living? Because, I have to find a job, and how do I marry the things that I'm passionate about with a career, so to speak? And, it's funny because I never thought activism to me was a career. It was something that I really cared about and I would do regardless of what job I had. And it has gotten to the point now where I am able to supplement myself by doing some of the things that I care most about. And that is a huge privilege, and I'm really grateful for that. But I also think that, sometimes it's okay to work in a particular realm or job that doesn't necessarily have activism in it, and want to change that space that you're in. I've met a lot of people over the years who are like, oh, I want to be a lawyer, and I'm not really sure if, I can do my activism on the side. And then I'm like, but there are so many lawyers who are fighting for environmental rights and also gender equality. That in itself is a form of change and activism as well. And so I think it's about finding what you love and what you really care about, and marrying that with what you're interested in as well. And I really do feel like there's potential to create and carve a path for yourself that is not only empowering for you, but also for your community.
Definitely. We all have a role to play, and there isn't one way to be a change maker. Just keep that in mind. Yes, change making, I feel, can be a full-time career. You see it here today, and all the different speakers that you're listening to. This is a full-time, lifelong journey. And it comes in many different ways, shapes, and forms. So it's exactly as Tori said, find whatever you love doing, what you're really good at doing, what your local or global community is looking for, needs, and just go for it. And I think this is also really an important point to bring up. And thinking again back to my 12-year-old self, we didn't have a business plan or a strategy or marketing or even a budget, but hey, we had the passion, we had the focus, and we had the drive. And I had my sister, my best friend. And that's sometimes all you need in order to get started. So don't ever let anything else hold you back. And don't wait until you're older to start making a difference or to start making change making your full-time career.
That's such an amazing answer. So let's go, Eve, please, if you have something in the end to say, because we need to wrap up, but this has such a safe space to talk and learn a lot.
I absolutely agree, Isabella. What a fruitful and insightful discussion we've had. I wish we had more time to dive deeper into the book, to dive deeper into YOUTHTOPIA, but unfortunately we don't. And so thank you so much for your time, Lati and Tori. Thank you so much to my beautiful co-moderator, Bella. I will now be handing back over to our MCs.